Hey everyone, this is the first video that I'm doing on the development of Ultraviolence. Today I'm just going to go over cleaning up an old animation that I had from a mocap suit and using it as a gameplay feature today. Right, so what happens is when you press the button to grapple, because it's a press button to grapple type of game, if you notice the red lines that come out, those are, you're trying to find the opponent to grapple. The problem I have is that when you press it, nothing happens. Right? There's no feedback to the player that you've failed to find a player to grapple. The moment you stop dead, because I'm halfway through actually doing this feature. So again, I press a button. Without me stopping, you wouldn't even know that anything had happened. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in this failure sequence. That was a way of saying it. So I'm going to put in a fail sequence for grappling. So if you've tried to execute grapple and you're nowhere near another player or you're not within range, we're not just going to play nothing. We're going to play some sort of feedback to the player. So as you do it, it's like, oh, you've whiffed that move to copy a phrase from another genre. So you've whiffed it. Maybe you'll be penalised. Like maybe the crowd will turn against you. You'll probably be vulnerable for quite some frames. So I actually have already some quite old animations that I've done for this. You can see that I'm even still using the Unreal Mannequin, the robot that everybody uses. This dates this animation from about, I don't know, 2018, maybe even earlier. It's about the time when I first got the mocap suits. So play the animation. It's not actually that bad. Kind of raw. There's not much going on, but it's enough for my purposes today. First thing I need to do then is re-export this animation to use our actual proper rig rather than the Unreal skeleton. There's not much to this, so I've already done this. I've already done export asset animation data, so I've exported it from here because I'm going to boot up iClone. I say iClone, this is actually the data exchange little bit of software that they provide, which you even have to pay for, which this dialogue comes up. Yeah, it's all fine. Now, admittedly, this is quite nice. This software that, again, you have to pay for, even though it should be a standard feature, detects that it was using the Unreal rig by default. So that's quite nice how it'll automatically do that. And so we wait for a little bit, converting real-time texture size, even though there's literally no textures on that. So the first thing is we're using an optimized version of our game default mesh. I stripped out as many textures as I could, but even though I did that, it still comes in with normal maps. And so one of the things I do is that I make sure that my transform is at 0. Reset 0 out. That has actually brought it in, which is pretty decent. And as I scrub through here now, see that playing that animation, and there's a few things that need cleaning up. The raw mocap take, it's actually one of the cleaner ones that's come through. There's not probably that much cleanup that's going to, but there is some cleanup. So first of all, it goes on to. So you can see here, I've already put my frame marker on frame 100. Anyway, I'm just going to set the project frames to about frame 100, and then automatically it's going to clip that. There's a few things I'd like to do with it. So it's got the mocap hands. And initially you might think, oh, cleaning up mocap hands, it's one of the last things that you'd want to do. But it adds a lot to the animation. So we're going to clean those hands up while we're in here. The thing I'm not going to do, I'm not going to do any facial animation. First thing we're going to do, I play it back. Not really that much jitter. It's actually kind of one of the things that you need to do. And again, had to pay extra for this to get a curve editor, and I am very salty about that. Anyway, the first thing you do is sample all parts, you do it optimized. So it's generated, actually, all of that. Got it all keyed. I'm going to open up the curve editor. Again, utterly ridiculous that you've even got to pay for a curve editor in animation software. And here's something that I found works well for mocap clips are already pretty clean and they just need a little extra pass. I normally do an optimize all pass on all my curves. Quite aggressive, and then a second pass. normally just smooth sync out ever so slightly. And then as we go back to our animation and playback. So now that's nice and smooth, and it's looking decent. Looking decent, but there's this here at the end. So as I come to this last pose, you can see that I'm just, this was me, mocap suit. You can see I'm just sort of looking down at the floor. An edit motion layer enables me to select my rig. I'm gonna select the head. If you press reset, it's almost like it puts in a default key or a 0 key here on this timeline. This is actually what I do need. And so this snapshots this pose entirely where I need. Because I'm happy with this pose right now. I'm here and I just position my head a bit more. So the head is working pretty well. I have noticed with this animation now as well is something to do with the legs, and they have some poses where they appear quite weak. Particularly here, you can see it's kind of like a banana leg. There's a bit too much curve on that leg there, and I think I spent a long time showing that. As I turn it round as well to see the front view, you can see really you're starting to get like the knees knocking together, and it's just overall just quite a weak pose. So in the next part, that's what we're actually going to be cleaning up. We're just going to be adding a little bit more strength to those poses. And this is going to be the corrective. I'm going to move the knee over a little bit. I'm going to move the foot over. Same with the other leg. Over to that. That looks like a stronger pose in this frame and in this view. And then as I come here, that's still pretty decent. I will just grab this foot and just move it back. Then yeah, that looks all right actually. Not too bad. So that reads quite nicely now. So I'm pretty happy with how that looks. Like the poses are quite nice. They're not as weak, particularly in this section. They're nowhere near as weak as they were. The legs are further apart. So I'm happy with that. And now that I'm happy with that, I'm actually going to flatten all keys again. Hit that. So I'm really sorry for this next bit. Oh, now in a nicer animation. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and add in Hatton. Sorry, I'm going to go ahead and add in the hand. And one of the nice things about iClone, I'll give it credit where it's due. It's got all these. You don't really want to watch me go through all the hand poses and put down the keyframes, so I sped this part up a little bit. The hands are doing things all at the same time because I've got. Great, train going by, that's beautiful. Because I've got the keys to be set on both hands at once, and this is kind of a clunky UI. I don't know how you would do it better, but it's quite clunky. I normally just let it all happen, let it play some. So you might think that's nearly done, and it's it's not bad actually. It's not bad, but there is one last thing to do. If I go to the top view, so the audio for this part was quite low, so I'm re-recording it. So my issue here with this animation is you can see that I'm traveling from the top left down to the bottom right. So I seem to be moving diagonally, which in game would feel a little bit weird. You'd rather just move on the forward axis. So here I'm just going to sample the torso section of the animation because I know that's where I need it. I'm going to pull the keyframes from that section, and I'm going to completely remove all the data on the X axis, and once that's done we shouldn't be traveling left and right. The animation that we'll be left with will just be going straight forward, which will feel better as the player actually uses it. I just delete the keys. I make sure the first key is on 0, which it is. So then you've got a nice animation. So now I'm happy that I've removed that animation from. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to export. Don't really need a thumbnail, but thank you. I'm going to export to Unreal, and I'm going to keep this open because I think this might be useful for some people who are watching. So obviously use the Unreal default. Now try Try as I might, I'm never able to stop it from exporting textures, which is just ballooning my hard drive space. Well, I mean, it's eating it at a massive rate. Um, there's a lot going on with iClone. So seriously, if you want to hear me go off on iClone for about an hour in a stream, just let me know down in the comments, and it's something that I would happily do. So here, these are the flags that I use. These technically I don't seem to have any, don't seem to do much for me. Embed motion generally seems to just export an additional pose, whether it's a T pose or an A pose. I really don't need that, so I just leave that off. I don't do current frame and I don't do all. I make sure that I'm only focusing on the sections that I'm interested in. And like I say, even if you click embed textures, those textures are always there. I'm just going to bring them, but that doesn't get saved either, so it's a losing battle. So I'm going to export that. It'll export, and then I will see you back in Unreal. So obviously when I said I'd see you back in Unreal, what I really meant was I'll see you in another video. So I've recorded the second part of this video where we're actually going to use this animation inside of Unreal. I was a bit concerned that it was going to be about an hour long, which is why I cut this. So hopefully, if I ever get around to it, we'll have a second video. And yeah, hopefully some of you found it useful. See ya!